Most Violent Year, which is the new film by J.C. Chander, who made Margin Call with Paul Bettany, which I think you really liked, didn't you?
I'm sure I did.
Okay, fine. Margin Call.
If you say I did, I agree with you.
Yeah, so Margin Call is a brilliant sort of financial thriller about this moment when absolute financial implosion is about to happen.
You're right, I did.
And it has a fantastic... Yeah, I know you did because we were talking about it earlier today. So, like, you know...
Whatevs.
Grandad. I've never forgotten where I was now. Oh, yes, Grandad. Anyway. Stop it. Really terrific financial thriller. And then All Is Lost, which was significant because it was almost wordless. It was Robert Redford on a boat. And at the beginning of it, the boat gets pranged by a floating container that's just, awash in the ocean. And then over the rest of it, you see him attempting to shore the boat up and to not sink without talking. I mean, so it is an almost entirely wordless film. So in the case of this, it's set in 1981, and it owes a debt, I think, to the films of Sidney Lumet. The story is Oscar Isaac in his second performance in a very good movie this week. It's interesting that you could watch this and Ex Machina back to back and actually not be aware that you're watching the same guy, and it's not just because the haircut and the clothes are different. It's because he's a mercurial actor. So he plays Abel Morales, Colombian-born, now businessman, in 1981, attempting to expand his heating fuel business by buying some real estate in Brooklyn from which the business can expand. However, his trucks are being regularly hijacked by whom he is not sure, and he's desperate to find out. But the DA won't help because actually all the DA is interested in doing is investigating his misdemeanors. He is desperately trying to stay on the right side of the law. There was an echo of that, the Al Pacino line in Godfather 3, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. But he is connected to the mob through the fact that his wife, brilliantly played by Jessica Chastain, is the daughter of an infamous gangster. He, however, is convinced that they are set to get the business on the road to respectability, but she's the Lady Macbeth figure who at one point says to her husband brilliantly, sort it out, because if you don't, I will, and you won't like what'll happen if I get involved. Here's a clip.
This is probably one you're going to regret.
Excuse me?
My husband's an honorable man. We're not who you think we are.
I think I know your father.
Good for you. My husband is not my father. Not even close. So if I were you, I would start treating us with a little more respect, or I guarantee he will make it his mission in life to ruin you.
That's almost Inception-like music running in the background.
Yeah, there's this sort of, synthy organy thing going on there, Alex Ebert, who, interestingly enough, when he was talking about the score, he was talking about, on the one hand, because you're trying to place it in 1981, so you're trying to use that electronica inflected sound. But also he was talking about Suicide, the band Suicide, the kind of post-punk, who they were just like a drum machine and a synth. And he talks about that angst being something which inflected the score for this. And it's shot by the same guy who shot Ain't Them Body Saints, Bradford Young, who, when they did Ain't Them Body Saints, he shot it on 35mm and had this fantastic sort of nostalgic feel, looked like a Terrence Malick film from the early 1970s. This is shot on the Arri Alexa on digital with this sort of yellow tinge to it. And it has a wintry setting. Apparently the original script wasn't set at winter at all, but that's the weather turn. They had to do it in the winter. And actually it works really well because you get, on the one hand, these kind of crisp, brisk, chilly exteriors against these brooding, sombre interiors. 1981 is sort of famously a year in which the violent crime statistics in New York peaked, and then peaked again in the early 90s. So now there are some sequences in it that you would describe as action sequences. There's a tense bridge shootout. There's a chase which goes from car to foot to railway, which kind of plays like this sort of sombre variation on that epochal chase scene from The French Connection. But actually, for most of the drama, the real fireworks happen in the conversations between husband and wife, between the attorney is played by Albert Brooks with this sort of fantastically miserable, world-weary, dyspeptic sort of look about him, and conversations between him and the district attorney, and of course between the district attorney, David Oyelowo, doing a terrific job, incidentally, facing off against Abel Morales, explaining that the reason they're not going to help him is because they're going to investigate him, and yet this clampdown that he's doing is actually much more motivated, clearly, by politics than it is by any desire to clean up the city. It's to do with political ambition. And it's funny because in a way the story itself is quite slender. The story itself is quite simple. It's about somebody trying to stay away from gangsterism while setting up whilst establishing this business in an area in which gangsterism is rife. And the dramatic high points are actually to do with conversations. They're actually to do with the observations of the way in which... I mean, there are moments between Jessica Chastain and Oscar Isaac that are absolutely terrific. I was talking to Nigel Floyd about this, and he loves the film, and he said that there was a Q&A that he referenced in which he said that, in fact, it turns out that they've known each other for years and years, way back from when they were first sort of learning their craft. And you sort of get a sense of that on screen when you see it's the tiniest gestures. There's a marvellous sequence of her when she's cooking the company books in order for this inspection to happen, and she's doing it holding a pencil in order to sort of preserve her nails, and it's just a really well observed portrait of somebody who is really in control and really powerful and who you really do not want to mess with. And as I said, that moment, I mean, there are actually slightly more alarming moments in the sort of the counterplay between her and him. So very, very well played. J.C. Chanda is a terrifically interesting writer and director. I think the whole film has a great look to it. It's interesting because it's not a huge, great, sprawling crime epic. What makes it fascinating is that on some levels, and some people have said that sometimes when you're watching it, you think, well, not much is happening, is it? But it's sort of what is happening lingers. And actually what you realise is that what is happening between them, is happening between those central characters and the way their relationships are both centrally dealing with this crisis. Very impressive work.